Here I am Kathy Evans, and I teach here in the teacher education program at Eastern Mennonite University. And we have currently been working with local educators on building restorative justice in education practices, and specifically looking at what does restorative justice look like in our schools and in our classrooms, and how can we promote that in ways that actually work to dismantle some of the things that we watched in this video. So I'm really excited about this conversation today. We do have monthly webinars. The next one obviously will be in April, and we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. You can also access those on our website, and I'll put that link in the chat. And at that website, you can find resources, and there's webinars available. There's links there to those. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we host an annual Restorative Justice and Education Conference every summer at the end of June, and there's information on that website about that as well. One of the things that it is a great pleasure to be able to do is to partner with the Zehr Institute. And so this has been a really exciting endeavor for us to partner on this particular topic, as it crosses both educational contexts and our criminal legal system and our community work that we want to promote. How do we make more spaces where restorative justice is practiced, is lived out in transformative ways? So we are really excited to have you here today, and look forward to the conversations that ensue. Thanks, John.
All right. Thanks, Kathy. Well, you all have watched the film on these grounds, so I won't describe it in depth because you've already watched it. But On These Grounds is a documentary that traces the people and the impacts of that happened after a white police officer removed a black girl student from her chair in the middle of in the class, and the filming of that, the video of that happening is what went viral in 2015. And so we're really excited to have Naya with us, and I think Vivian is also going to be joining, though I do not see Vivian here yet, but Naya's with us. Our goal for this webinar really is to create an interactive space for all of us to be able to continue the conversation about what we saw as we watched the documentary, the impacts, and how all of this relates to equity and justice in our education systems. But before we get into that conversation, I'd really like to invite Naya to share from her perspective about the events that occurred over 7 years ago, and how those events have impacted Naya. So Naya, if I could just turn to you, and as I just mentioned, that the moment that went viral happened over 7 years ago when you were in high school.
Right, I was 18.
Yeah. As you remember those moments, can you tell us a little bit about what you remember thinking or feeling at the time? And then kind of what have you thought about in the 7 years since?
Honestly, in the last few years, I try not to, that sounds kind of bad, but like think about it too much, just because it is still like some trauma there that I just haven't dealt with, still haven't talked to anyone about it. But like in that moment, I used to say, oh, I was so scared, I was so terrified, but like I felt alone, like I was standing by myself in that moment, like my teacher quieting me down, and oh, there's Miss Vivian. Alone in that moment. Like nobody, was saying anything with me. A few of my classmates were like, "Naya, sit down, sit down." And even the events like following after, like then when the students had made the shirts and were like, "Bring back fields," and doing the class walkouts, like even some of my friends ended up doing this. And I was just like, dang, I've never felt more alone in high school than I did after that event.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. What have been some, like, since then? What do you see as the longer term impacts of those moments for you?
Well, the victory, I don't know if anyone is familiar with the ACLU case.
I know that it's not supposed to be that.
I'm sorry, was somebody? Oh, anyway, so the victory, I feel like that's the biggest impact, where students can no longer be charged with disturbing schools. I'm like, what bigger impact than that?
Yeah. So the actual, like, changing of the law that existed that led to your arrest,
Right.
essentially. Yeah.
It's kind of like, who doesn't like to say, like, yeah, take that.
Yeah. Yeah. Vivian, welcome. It's good to see you. I'll
Hello. I'm sorry I'm late.
no,
Hello.
that's totally fine. We're just getting started with giving you and Naya a chance to tell a little bit of your story. But can just a similar question that I just asked Naya, but for you, what do you remember thinking and feeling what it's a little over 7 years ago now, when that video went viral, and kind of what have you thought and felt since? What have been the impacts that have lasted into the present for you?
Oh, wow. Okay. Hi, everybody. Again, I'm sorry I'm late. So when everything happened, my first thing was, like I always say, I didn't see the video right away. Somebody called and told me about it. And I was like, I can't watch it. I can't watch another child being hurt. And I didn't see the actual video first. I saw Naya being released from jail, and which had me like, like, wait a minute, how's this little girl talking about she knows she had to do, she knew she had to be the one because there was not going to be anybody else to help. And then I saw the video, and I often share I probably couldn't sleep. I just couldn't sleep. And I felt it in my bones. I felt it in my spirit. I was like, oh, God, really? We going? And all I really felt was like, I just want to hug them. I just want to hug them and let them know that they are not alone. And, it's going to be okay. Didn't know what okay was, but just like, you are not alone in this moment. Especially Naya, like, no, this is not yours to carry. You a child, right? So we're supposed to hold you. And I think that moment hasn't left me, right? With the work that I do is still making sure that young people know that they do not have to carry this alone. They do not have to be the ones carrying this and doing this heavy lifting that we're supposed to be doing. And and just making sure as best I can that other girls don't have to experience it. And if they do, that they have support thereafter. So same way we worked with Naya and Shakara, have been working with other girls who have experienced this same type of harm in schools.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. We do want to give a chance for everyone to introduce themselves. And because we've got this many people in the meeting, let's do it this way. If you could put in the chat, if you are able, your name, pronouns, and where are you joining us from? So if you could go ahead and do that, we can kind of watch those come in. What we're going to do next is give you all, we're going to do some breakout rooms to give you all an opportunity to speak with a smaller group of folks about your experience as you watched the film. And then we'll after 10 or so minutes, 15 minutes of breakout room conversation, we'll come back as a larger group and have more conversation with each other, with Naya, with Vivian, just about what came up in your breakout rooms. So we're gonna have three breakout rooms. And so I'm going to ask you to put something else in the chat in just a second. Breakout room number 1 will be for those of you who would define yourself as a restorative justice or whose role is a restorative justice coordinator, restorative justice practitioner. So that would be that's going to be breakout room number 1. Breakout room number 2 is for those of you who are teachers or training to be teachers. These are just suggested. They're not going to be hard boundaries. You're not going to do something wrong if you get into the wrong breakout room. But breakout room 2 is teachers and those of you training to be teachers. And then breakout room 3 is going to be for community members. Some of you all are students, a kind of undefined category. Does that make sense? So the next thing that I'd love for you to do, and Kara is going to help me with this, is put the number of the breakout room that you would like to join in the chat. So again, breakout room number 1 is restorative justice coordinators or practitioners. Number 2 is teachers and or training to be a teacher, and number 3 is community member or other undefined. When you get in your breakout rooms, feel free to introduce yourselves to each other, talk a little bit about the work that you're doing, but really want to center the conversation on kind of what were your thoughts as you watched the documentary? How did what you saw in the documentary, how does that relate to the work that you're doing, that you hope to do, that you've seen done in other places? We're all educators here, so I'm assuming that breakout rooms will be fairly easy for you all to engage in some conversation. We'll do breakout rooms for 15 minutes, and so at about 5:30 Eastern time, realizing you all are not all on the same time, we'll come back to this larger room and just have more conversation. That makes sense? Kara, are you good with getting folks into breakout rooms?
I am. I've already got breakup room 1 assigned. I'm working on the others.
Okay.
All right, bear with me. Thank you guys for being patient.
I didn't want to interrupt Naya or John or Kathy earlier, but I'm going to take this brief pause as an opportunity to share that registration for the 2023 RJE conference just went live today. So I'm going to drop that in the chat. We would love to continue this conversation in the coming months, including 2 intensive days in June. So you are all invited.
Thank you for that.
All right, so opening the rooms now.
See you all in 15 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and stay in this room.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So those of people were in my group. I meant to push the button to make the message go away, and I ended up like leaving the breakout room. So, so I do that often. So anyway, welcome back. I'm sure that wasn't enough time for the conversations that you wanted to have, but I hope that there were some good conversations. Maybe we can just hear from each group a summary of some of the points that came up in your group. And we can start with group 1, RJ practitioners and coordinators and such. Somebody want to kind of talk from that space? I can call on people too.
If anybody like me, I don't even know my group number.
Hey y'all, I was in that group. It was Dennis, myself, and Tina and Don, and we talked about the fact that they missed her need from the very beginning. It went too far, too fast, and they completely missed the need. Could have been avoided, most definitely so.
Anybody else from room 1 kind of want to chime in and add anything to that? Yes. And are there other thoughts that came out of that group?
Sure, Kathy. For me, it was the point of the system. Going along with what Andrea said about missing the need. It was the system that also failed in so many different ways. And I would say systems, the policing system, the educational system, the court system. There's just a lot of systemic issues that they raised and need further conversation and further action. We've known this. We've known it for a long time. So let's act instead of just study.
Thanks, Dennis. Anybody else from group 1?
I was also thinking about, especially when we do documentaries about things and about this particularly and getting different perspectives. I wish we could have heard from the principal, the school, the teacher in the room. What was where are you now with it? What's your story? So that it's just not hers against him. And also Naya's. I mean, everybody saw it. So I wish there was more perspective. I also appreciated that the police officer, because that's what he is, participated. It was pretty courageous of him and really showed, him participating tells the story, the truth, right? Of how, police are, how they're trained, how they act. Also his bias, he was classic with all I know someone Black, I dated somebody, all those and just the walls that are up, between, it just was so illustrative of that issue. But I just wish we could have also heard those other perspectives, because I wonder, what's learning that those folks, the teachers, the principal may have had.
Thanks, Tina. Marianne asks, I believe the teacher and the AP refused to be interviewed. Is that right, Vivian?
Yes, they weren't, the way that they threw this child behind the wall, they threw a wall of protection in front of these two. And I believe Naya may have some updates and feedback on how, because I believe, Tina, you asked around what does it look like now, right? He's still in the classroom. That principal is not at the school, but I know Naya, because she has relatives and she had connections with the school after, she may have some more feedback for you.
So like she said, the assistant principal never came out, never spoke. His family or kids never said anything. But like after being in contact with young people who were still going to the school, their thing was kind of like they still like taunt Mr. Long, like they give him hell, like, or I don't know how it is right now, 7 years later, but like initially, right after it, they said that, no one would behave in his class. You did that to that girl, and a lot of taunting was going on there. I was like,
Thanks, y'all, for that update. What about group 2? These are educator folks. Anybody from group 2 want to kind of chime in and talk about what was discussed in that group? Yeah. So Paul just put in the chat, I'd love to hear Vivian's wisdom in response to Imani's question. One of the questions that came up in group 2, Imani asked, do you want to talk about that, Imani? Would you?
So sometimes I ramble, so I don't necessarily know exactly which questions I posed. But I do know one was whether there's value in bringing certain people, in this case, Ben Fields, into a conversation in order to get him to understand the systemic, institutionalized aspect of policing, SROs, racism, just all the things. When he clearly is not able to receive what is being said, especially if facts are presented, it's like it's not getting through. So whether there's value in bringing like people like him into conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's value, especially from this documentary. I know for a fact that there have been people who their SROs or people in police who even who was like, he's right. This documentary had them go, hold up, wait a minute. And especially when he was talking, because he was telling on himself. We didn't have to do it. The words were coming out of his mouth, not ours. And and for those who are doing restorative justice and we know what it looks like, we say everybody comes to the table because we honor all humanity, because we have to honor he did have his own feelings, his own beliefs. He came with something. And until we get everybody to the table, it's going to be a one-sided conversation. But Imani, I know for sure there were people that's like, oh, I don't want to look like that. But they saw themselves in him. And then they had to go back and say, how can things be different? How can this be different? But if we're only saying if we only bring one type of view to the table, it's just like talking to the choir. But when you bring all the voices, you get to say, okay, well, even if it wasn't in the classroom, because I had to check myself, when did I show up like that? Where it's like, well, this is my job and this is how I'm supposed to do it. I'm not looking to be open to another point of view. And, because sometimes we are going to stand our ground and we should not move. But there are times when we have to say, wait a minute, am I being right? Am I trying to be right? Do I want what's right, or am I trying to be right? Right. And you see, he stayed with just wanting to be right instead of moving into what looks, what is right. But I think it was a value because even if it wasn't him, it touched somebody else to have their situation in their schools looking different.
Thank you, Vivian.
And thank you for the question.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. I have
Yeah,
to
we gotta sit with it.
I'm thinking.
It's not easy. It's not. And this work we're doing is not.
Yeah.
This is not easy. And I also say, Monty, if you are in this space where you have to bring people until you're ready, you don't have to do it right away, but you want to sit with what's stopping you from bringing the person to the table. because I was sharing in our group how I had to do a lot of praying. I had to, ooh, okay, Jesus, what we gonna do? Because and it's a lot of not about me, but through me, and whatever is supposed to go, not about me, but through me. So,
Wow. Thank you. Anybody else from group 2 kind of want to talk about what was discussed in that room? Gretchen, Hannah, Marcella, Tina.
Yeah, I'll just briefly note that something that stuck with me throughout the entirety of the documentary, and I still think about, is the, I believe it was Janae Davis. She was the environmental scientist who was in the swamps at the beginning of the documentary. We got bits of that, and it just felt so prevalent. I mean, it was, of course, right, it was incorporated in the documentary, but the history of our physical environmental spaces, how that bleeds into institutions. And yeah, I would be curious, Vivian, or Naya, if like that engagement of with Janae Davis and the incorporation into the documentary, how that, yeah, what is your process thinking about those things coinciding? What happened in the classroom with like the environmental components of our history, including slavery, and who was a part of the land?
yeah, I've been talking. I was going to give Naya some chance to talk. Let's see if she's still with us or had to step away. I could say for me, I'm not sure about Naya. The way the directors did things, I never met her before the documentary, but I met her after, and I was fangirl all day long because I could watch that over and over again, because I think for me, that was what we were saying. There's like the historical context. If you can, the South had something different, right? And you had, there has to be a way, and she so eloquently wove it all together. And I also think it's because of her piece that it opened up a broader conversation for some other folks, because then it took it off of just this one thing, this one day, which was a terrible day, but it didn't make it just about that day. It opened up to say, what happened 100 steps back that led to that moment? And how can we use that to go 100 steps further? So somebody wrote, yes, the context of it. So she was able to lay that in without bringing, and even what weaving in is like, this is how he could do that without excusing behavior. Because I think it's for Imani again, one of the toughest things that I have is when I am bringing other folks to the table, or when I speak to him, I'm still like, oh, I hope Naya and Shakara don't think that I'm siding with him, I'm doing this, or I want people to feel sorry for him. And it's not this. I know they love me and I love them. And we talked about me having that conversation, but it's all those things. And I think, but for that, when I tell you I'm fangirl all day with her, because if I show any clip, you can clip everything else out. If we can weave it from what she says, when she said it's a thickness, we can, it's something, no matter where you are, you can lean into it and say, how does this fit my world? So that was just, I thought that was one of the most powerful pieces to the documentary.
Yeah. Thank you for that. What about group 3? Are there things, highlights from group 3 that we want to bring into this conversation? What did y'all talk about?
So one thing I think that that was missed, I was thinking about, George Floyd, when when the incident happened with him, it was supposedly a $20 bill that was counterfeit, or it was suspected of being counterfeit. So no one even thought to find out first if it was counterfeit, right? Same thing I think happened with Shakira. I'm sorry, I keep getting her name. Shakira. Same thing happened with her. She had an IEP with it, which is an individualized education plan, which had that is a contract between the school and her parent, saying what services the child is going to get, because she's protected by federal law under IDEA, okay, as a student with special needs. And that wasn't even followed. She requested to meet with her resource teacher, which was a bona fide request. It was written into her IEP. So she should have been given the opportunity to do that. When she tried to reach out, the teacher blocked it. So her rights were violated. And I think Vivian in our group, maybe Vivian can speak to that, but my thing was that is a federally protected, protected by federal law. Her rights were violated as a result of that. And right there, that should have been a blanket view for everyone to see that that was inappropriate. They never gave her a chance to even, she didn't have a phone. The whole thing was about a phone. She didn't even have a phone. And so this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about young people being outlined or determined that they're doing something wrong when they're not. And then when they try to speak up for themselves and advocate for themselves, they're criminalized.
Mm-hmm. Marianne, thank you for bringing that up. That was one of the things that stuck out to me as well as a former special education teacher. Like, the system failed right there. Like, there wasn't in place her rights. Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. And there are comments going on in the chat for those of you. I won't read them all. Any other thoughts from group 3?
Well, I wanted to add one thing with Marian is that one of the things that's happening. So Ayanna Presley, one of the things that she brought to the state, brought a bill that she worked on was the push out bill. And one of the aspect of it was addressing just that and having a way to track how many teachers, how many school systems, because we found from after that, we found that kids had IEPs, but teachers weren't looking at them. Some teachers didn't even really understand what the IEP was. Some was like, oh, it just means this. It just means I got a child with special needs and that's it. They don't even know all the law says. They don't even know what they're supposed to be doing. So what the law, what that bill was stating is that we have to have accountabilities. Teachers have to go through training, really understand, like to know that they understand what the IEP was, and some actions to be held if they don't follow the IEP. Because we found like over and over again, how many educators were not following the IEP. It was like, oh, well, I just think I was working one case here in Lexington, South Carolina, and the little girl, she was 8, 9, she was 10 at the time, 9 or 10, 5th grade. And she ends up being slammed and handcuffed because she was a child with an IEP, and the way her IEP was set up, all the things from step 1 to step 2 was just not in place. So when they say, when you approach, you cannot touch, or this happens, you violating. But unfortunately, we had to have that one incident happen, that one assault, for us to be able to use that always. And so somebody asked earlier, I think it was Marian mentioned earlier, so we were able to get that child removed to another school and have public fundings paid for it because the public school wasn't able to handle the needs that she had. But it's because we can go on like, this is what the school, she's in your district, she's in that. So it's been steps like that that's happened since Spring Valley.
Thanks, Vivian.
Yes, and the disconnect also, Vivian, is that I don't believe that police officers should be in school at all.
Absolutely.
But if they are going to be there, they need to be trained They get no training regarding children and their IEPs. They don't know what student has an IEP. They don't know what behavior intervention plan that child may have. So I think that's where there's another disconnect that needs to be done, but you know, it'd be better if they're not there altogether, but.
And in this case, he knew, right? He knew. And most of them know, and they do the same thing that we do with all our children. We put them in a box, say, oh, that's just a child with this issue. They don't, there's no, and it's just not with the officers in the school. There's so many, oh, that means this one got to, you know, but it doesn't matter what they have. If all I see is a criminal, you having a special need is criminal behavior. So those were, but absolutely right. The officers aren't. And even when they start now saying, oh, let's train them in it, but then you training them so they can be the first one to respond to this child versus having us, you know, the actual skilled professionals, the healthcare professionals, mental health professionals that need to be in that place.
Yeah, Sean has this, the SROs don't report to the principals. I think that varies from school to school as well. Like in some places, depending on how the MOU is spelled out, they may, but I think most of the time, my understanding is that most of the time, they are auxiliary to school personnel.
Yeah. And when we say report to, they work alongside, but they don't report to the principal. The principal is not the person who's the principal can be like, I don't want them here, but it's going to be the police force, the sheriff, or whatever town you're in. They make that decision. A principal can recommend it, but she can't just be like, he got to go. He or she has to go.
Well, which is why the SRO can be in the school as and maintain, like, I am a police officer, not an educator, right? Which is partly the piece of, like, I'm not bound to the IEP in a way, like they are legal. And also I think that's a potentially a missing piece.
Right.
I see Marianne talking about manifestation determination hearing. So is the child's behavior a direct manifestation of their disability? And that question gets asked sometime, but in my experience, very seldom do those determinations actually say yes, and therefore we should do something different to actually meet the needs of the students. In the schools that I've been in, almost always there's like, no, they should know better. Which again comes back to the criminalization of behaviors that should be seen as developmental, and or a starting place for a conversation.
Yeah, because my experience working with so many, and it's not right, wrong, good or bad, it's just my experience where we're creating schools where kids are supposed to transform, going like kids are supposed to transform to a school system versus the school system aligning itself to meet the needs of the child.
Yeah. What time is it, John? How much time?
Yeah, I know before we were about to, I think we were moved from everywhere else. Naya was cut off, and Marian asked, like, what would been like, what can adults do? And I love what she was starting to say, and I was if she can remember, because I know she got all the stuff happening in the house.
Yeah,
and if she could just share with a larger audience.
yes. So she was just asking, what can adults do to stand with students who are, how she described it, courageous. My response was just like, honestly, like, stand in solidarity, because you guys, earlier in the group, they kind of asked, how are you feeling in that moment? Or in a bigger group, my bad. And I was just like really alone, like I couldn't believe, really alone and shut down. I couldn't believe somebody was like silencing me and telling me to be quiet in that moment. Those were just like initial feelings. But like as far as what adults could do, I literally like standing with children, like, and not making them feel like, oh, you know, shut your mouth or adhere by these rules and you know. And so that's what we were just that's where I got cut off at.
Well, I would love to just invite us. I heard somebody at the very beginning say, like, they missed her needs, the system failed, we need further action. So like, what are those actions? And can we take just a moment and maybe name some of the things, like what do we do differently based on having seen this video, this documentary? What does it mean to stand in solidarity with young people? What does it mean to do something that will interrupt these moments of violence? What does it look like for you?
Well, just honestly for me, when I literally say stand in solidarity with youth, I just mean like allow them to voice their opinion on the problem, just allow them to use their voice. It's honestly really simple. If you ask me, you know, in that moment I was being shut down and I was literally just kind of reacting to stuff. And when I say stand with a child, you don't like literally have to like stand up for them like that's right, but don't shut down.
I have a question that I'd like to pose to both Vivian and Naya. So for someone who is a community member, not necessarily an educator, but that wants to be an ally. Let's say it is someone who's in school as an SRO as the present system requires, or they are in some way in the school, but not an educator. How would you advise that person to, within their role and capacity, be an ally to students that are facing this type of, dare I say, oppression? I don't want to be too aggressive with my language, but that type of, if nothing else, neglect.
Now you want to go? Because I think I need to hear the actual question one more again, because I have some thoughts, but I want to make sure I'm answering the right question.
The question again.
Sure. So for folks who are community members, but they are not educators, but they like to be allies. There was one SRO that I thought during the documentary, I can't recall his name, but he, yes, he well, no, he appeared to be less about covering himself and just in some way seemed to want to be an ally. So that aside, my question is, how would you advise someone who is a community member, who maybe they're an SRO under the present system, maybe they are just in some way, shape, or form in the environment, but they are not educators and they want to be allies? How would you advise them to be allies to children who are in this situation, or students, excuse me, who are in this situation?
One way is allowing yourself to be like an outlet for youth. You know, these youth may be going through stuff and they just literally have nobody. And I guess like kind of reassuring them, reiterating the fact that, you know, I am here for you. You know, it's literally like little things, you know, just reminding them you're not alone in this school. I am an adult, but I am with you, you know, just like little affirmations like that.
Yeah. And I would say on the other end of that, you're a community member. There's city council meetings, let your voice be heard. There's school board meetings, let your voice be heard. Even if you're not a parent, let your voice be heard. Your council folks, right? All of that. And then even in community, what does that look like? Oftentimes we take it right back to the school, but they're at the grocery store. The kids, like Naya said, they're at the grocery store with us. It's like, hey, how you doing? Not having them be invisible And, you know, one of the things is oftentimes you only want to see it when it's like, oh, well, I volunteered at the school. All those things are absolutely great. But there are other ways where it's like when the petitions come around, or when they're looking for signatories, or when they're asking folks to show up because they need representation at a legislative hearing. When things are happening like that, allyship does not mean standing right there, or like Naya said, right there, we're about to protest right now. It means like, even if you don't know it, I'm signing that I'm a no against this. When I go to vote, I'm making sure this is not there. I'm making sure, who is, because oftentimes, like, well, I don't have kids. I ain't paying no attention to that school board election. I'm not even paying attention to who's running for PTA, but pay attention to who's running for PTA. And if there is a PTA at the school, right? And that's another way to be an ally. How can I help from the out regions, not just necessarily all on the inside? And thanks for asking that question, because I think oftentimes we're like, oh, it has to look this way, but no, it can be like, oh, there's some phone banking to have, SROs move. That may not be your thing, it may be, but and being in the room as much as you can and sharing the information and speaking it wherever you are, that's allyship.
Yeah, thanks, Cara, for the question, and Vivian, thanks for that, and Naya, thanks for your input as well. I think one of the ways also is just to keep having this conversation. I mean, I'm looking at the clock, and I know it's time for us to wrap up, and yet, like, there are other things that can be said, and there are other people with whom we can talk about the need for more just and equitable schools. And I know one of the things that I've encouraged people to do is go love on a teacher. Teaching is hard right now. Schools are places of conflict, and to be in schools right now it tests you. It does. And so find some educators and encourage them. If you're not a teacher, like, go find some teachers and love on them. And find some students. And I do want to just bring attention one more time to the webinar next month that will be on intergenerational partnerships. And so it would be an excellent place to invite people to continue this conversation about how we work collaboratively.
I have one announcement. Can I share? I'm not gonna post it, so you're one of the first groups to know. You started it because you said love up on teachers. Always look at all the angles that I can come from this from. And I never want, I don't do the blame game. So I started a fellowship for teachers. They'll be with me for 12 months, pouring into them because they pour into our young people. They'll be doing healing justice work, restorative justice work. They'll be learning how to infuse the On These Grounds curriculum guide into the classroom, but they'll be having weekends that we take them away and just say, your school year is over and we just want to thank you. So it's a mix of both, right? But having them understand that oftentimes if the pressure is coming on a child, the pressure is coming on you, and how can we break up this system? So I'm trying to figure out, I work with kids, but I still believe I want to work with the educators, and administrators are next. So I had 5 brave souls decided to take a year-long journey with me. So I'm really happy about the Represent Justice Fellowship.
Oh, that is so exciting. Thank you.
Oh.
Y'all, thank you. Thank y'all. Oh my goodness, thanks to everyone for being here. Thanks for caring about our young people. And Naya and Vivian, thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to invite you to any last words before we close out.
Say thank you guys so much for having us, and just for continuing the conversation. It's just so good to know that the conversation isn't done. It's just continuing as the years come on. And I'm like, okay, I'm 25 now. Are they not tired of hearing about this? And it's just so heartwarming that nobody's ever tired of hearing it. So thank you guys so much.
Yes, I echo what Naya said. I'm just so happy and especially at all levels, because we forget that some, like the Disturbing Schools Law, it happens on the college levels, right? So I'm always like, there are they still are babies too. They still aren't yet all the way adults. So we get to hold them to it. And what are the ways that we support at that level? So I'm very glad that we're having this conversation, especially as so many might be preparing to be educators or social workers or just a whole nother, but they still have those issues that they face within schools.
Mhm.
So
Thanks,
thank you
y'all.
for having us.
Thanks to you all for being here. Thanks to everyone for being here. And John, any last words?
Thank you all so much for coming. Thanks to teacher ed folks at EMU for collaborating on this, and for Naya and Vivian for joining us. It's always good to see you all.
All right.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Kathy.
Oh, John.
We will sign out then.
Okay, bye.
I stay in touch, y'all.
Yes, yes, absolutely.